Alright, so I'm back with my video after I refilled up my bobbin thread, and I went back in and I basted along this edge of this fold line 1/4 of an inch. So we're back on track now, and hopefully you guys just finished your basting stitch while you were going. So what we need to now grab is our hem gauge here, and we're going to measure along. The basting stitch that we just did. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Along the bottom edge of our fold line, because that's going to be our hem line. And you need to make sure that wherever you line it up here, that it is shorter than your than the edge, the bottom edge of your curve. So my edge, the distance from the folded edge of my hem to the curve area where it starts to curve, I did mine fairly curvy, I guess, and I only have about 3/4 of an inch between the bottom edge of my curve and the bottom edge of my hem in this curve line. So I need to adjust my hem gauge to only be 1/2 of an inch, so that's going to be the hem that I'm going to be doing, because otherwise it's just it's not deep enough here. I might be able to get away with 5/8, so I guess I'm gonna shoot for 5/8 here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just adjusting this part of my hem gauge so that the flat part lines up with 5/8, and then I'm going to place that right along the bottom of my hem line, and then I'm going to use my tailor's chalk and just mark along the top here. So again, and then I'm going to move it over, line that up, my hem gauge up there at 5/8, and then do a marking right along the top with my tailor's chalk. And then I'm just going to keep moving across this distance. Make sure, double check and make sure that your hem gauge doesn't accidentally move on you, and then just continue this line all the way across. Okay. So then we have this. Your instructions say to fold it up. You're gonna use your hem gauge to mark up 1 inch, but my curve line was just a little too curvy. So what I would do is I would measure and make that decision for yourself. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our sewing shears and we're going to trim our fabric off along this edge. So I'm going to just trim it about 1/8 of an inch above that hem line that I just drew. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to reduce that curve that was once in my fabric. And if we had a wider piece of fabric, we would be easing this a little bit more. And now what we're going to do is we're going to baste from the outer edge towards the inside. And we're going to do this, and make sure that you have your long basting stitch as long as it will go. And then we're going to start from the outside edge, and we're going to sew from the outside edge, our raw edge, towards the center. Then we're going to flip our fabric around and we're going to stitch from the outside edge towards the center so that we have these long tails in the middle. So go ahead and do that. Again, well, we're going to be doing some back stitching at our raw edges, but then leave the tails in the center, and we're stitching right along those the markings that we had done with our tailor's chalk. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. I'm just going to grab like 1 thread of a back stitch and then come back forward. And again, when I hit that center area, I'm going to stop my stitching and then have some long thread tails. And then I can go back and trim the thread tails where I had done some back stitching, and then toss those to the side. And then I'm going to come back in with on the other side here, and I'm just going to follow those lines that I had done using my hem gauge, and I'm going to do back stitching at the front of this, just grabbing one or two back stitching stitches, and then as I get closer to that center seam line, I'm going to stop, raise my needle up, and make sure that I have some decent long thread tails here. Oop. Okay. So what I have is I have these longer thread tails right in the middle. Now what we can do is, if this was a little bit more curved, we would actually ease by pulling this thread tail in, giving that a pull, and we're only pulling one at a time. And what that does is it kind of creates a gather. So if this was a little bit more curved, and you might get a slight gathering, and what we're doing is we're easing this the excess fabric that we would have from this hem to fit flat. And you can see if it's a little bit more flat by the front side as well. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to kind of gather up that basting stitch, and then I'm going to ease using my fingers. I'm going to just kind of press it and pinch it to the side so that I have like evenly spaced gathers along that hemline that I had just done. So again, you're just using your fingers to adjust the fabrics between those long basting stitches that you had pulled up by hanging onto that long thread tail on one half of your fabric piece, like on the left side of your seam or on the right side of your seam, just doing it one at a time. And I forgot to trim my thread tails over here. I was like, what? Where are those coming from? And just evening that out. And again, if this was a more curved piece, we would have a lot more gathers going on. Alright, so we're almost done here. What we're going to do next is we want to take this over to the ironing board and do a press on it. And depending on your type of fabric, you can place a piece of paper like cardstock, and I'll have some cardstock in the lab for us to use, but you can use some cardstock and just place that right behind your little edge of seam here and on the back side of your fabric, and you can really kind of steam this hem to lightly shrink it and to shrink out that excess fabric. So again, like once you're done here, I'm not going to demonstrate how to press it. I can show you in lab if you have any problems. But what we're going to do is, after you get that pressed, you're going to take these thread tails and tie those up. And you're going to do that on the front side too. If you can, it'd be better if you could pull those to the back side of the fabric. And you can do that by using either your snips or a seam ripper, just to grab a hold of them and pull them to the wrong side of the fabric. And just gently pull them here. I don't know, I might have accidentally pulled mine out. I'm just going to go ahead and snip it because I pulled it out and ripped it a little bit, but I can still make a knot with this other one by kind of making that balloon knot and tying it close to the bottom of the fabric here. And I'm going to go ahead and trim all those thread tails. Fairly close, since I have them knotted. And then I'm going to go back in, and I'm just going to take out half of my basting stitches so that you guys can see in class with this sample that those basting stitches were there at one time. And I'm taking off those original set of basting stitches along the bottom edge of the fabric that was holding up the turned hem. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip a couple of those and then go ahead and pull them out so that they're not there anymore. And then when I go over to the ironing board to give a good press, I'm going to use my press cloth and that cardstock to try to get that curved edge to be as flat as possible. But you guys shouldn't have too much problem because the curve wasn't super deep on this sample. But and just go ahead and label this exercise as turned up curved hem. So you can do turned up / curved hem and place this in your binder.